exploding over vaccine mandates and COVID lockdown measures. In this video, we're going to take a look at the massive demonstrations that took place across the globe over the weekend. We're going to see just how these protests are not just growing in number, but growing in boldness in the rebellion against our technocratic elite. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I reveal what's precisely going on with these worldwide revolts. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Great to be with you as always. I am your daily fake news antidote as each and every day. I provide patriotic analysis to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. See if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, if you're looking to lose a few lbs, you're going to love Keto Elevate. If you want the benefits of elevated ketone levels, but without actually having to do all the difficult parts of the keto diet, cutting out all the carbs and breads and the like, you'll want Keto Elevate. I use it myself. It tastes great, curbs my appetite for hours. And if you click on that link below, you can get your very first shipment of Keto Elevate on its way to you right now at a whopping 51% off the regular price. So don't wait, click on that link below and reap the rewards that Keto Elevate can bring to your life today. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. It does appear that we're beginning to see the whole showdown between patriots across the globe and the increasing number of vax mandate requirements by the respective governments reach critical mass. There is nothing less than a massive worldwide revolt against vax mandates going on right now as we speak across the globe. Let's start with France, where upwards of 425,000 protesters filled the streets of France's cities across the nation. Over 200 demonstrations were organized in cities across France to protest their government's draconian vax requirements. This is the 8th straight weekend that French citizens have filled the streets protesting against the so-called health pass that is increasingly being required for people to just participate in French social life. The chant of Liberté, Liberté has been heard resounding across the nation for 2 straight months as more and more French are rising up against government-mandated vax requirements. And protesters are starting to get very bold here. This is a scene from demonstrators storming a French mall, refusing to show proof of vaccination. And things got even crazier when the police were called. There were so many demonstrators flooding the mall that French police actually were forced to retreat. There was simply no match for the size of the crowd. And if you thought France was impressive, take a look at what's going on in the Netherlands. Tens of thousands came out this weekend to protest around Dam Square in Amsterdam in a demonstration against vax mandates and other coronavirus restrictions. Altogether, over 60 different organizations came together in a march entitled Together for the Netherlands to call their government to account for their mandate overreach. In Italy, thousands flooded the streets in cities across the country in protest of the vax pass. And in Greece, medical workers in particular have pushed back against compulsory vaccinations, especially those who have since been fired by the government for refusing to get vaccinated. So Europe really is exploding in a revolt against vax mandates. But we're seeing a comparable backlash in the nation of Australia as well. Nearly 10,000 truckers have gone on strike throughout Australia in protest against the vax mandates that the Australian government recently imposed upon them. The regulation was set to go in effect at the end of September, and I say was set to go in effect, and that's because Australian officials have backed down. The consequences of the trucker strike has been so utterly devastating to supply chains that many grocery stores throughout Australia are completely without stock. It literally looks like something coming out of Venezuela. So chalk one up for Australian truckers. And finally, in Canada, Upwards of 50,000 people marched in the streets of cities throughout the nation in defiance of vax mandates from their government as well. So as we can see, the story is pretty much the same wherever we go in the Western world. More and more populations are rising up and pushing back against what they consider to be the draconian policies of their respective governments. And I have to say, it's not just the West. From Tunisia to South Africa, social unrest is indeed sweeping across the globe, even among underdeveloped nations in response to their respective governments' handling of COVID. Now, of course, there are numerous explanations for this backlash. Each nation has its own particular, gripe with its own particular government, no question. However, there is something, I believe, common to all of these uprisings, to all of these blowbacks, that I think can help us put into perspective what's really happening here. We've often talked in this channel about the great global paradigm shift that's going on in the world right now. It's a shift from what scholars call the modern world, a world that was governed by scientific rationalism, industry, technology, right, technocracy and the like. We're shifting away from that world and we're entering more into what's called a postmodern world. And this world is postmodern in that it largely rejects the scientific meta-narrative of the modern world. More and more populations are rejecting that notion that there's a one-size-fits-all political and economic system that can be superimposed on all people based solely on purely rational and scientifically empirical assumptions about reality. The postmodern world is increasingly turning its back on our technocratic globalist elite and are instead turning back to nation, culture, custom, tradition as the basis for a flourishing social order. So what we have to understand here is, in the face of all these mass protests rising up all over the world, we have to understand this is a very predictable reaction to vax mandates and COVID lockdown measures that are all radically modernist in their sentiment. I think that's key to understand what's really going on here. Foreign Policy magazine actually ran a rather recent piece declaring that the pandemic proves that only technocrats and our class of elite experts can save us. Populists and patriots are indeed not merely irrelevant in this crisis, but they are indeed actually detrimental and harmful, especially in terms of how they denigrate our credentialed class. The COVID measures are, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong, the mandated policies of a technocratic elite. Now, the problem, of course, is that as we enter more and more into a postmodern world, the deference to science as the one-size-fits-all solution for COVID inevitably begins to wane. The technocratic solutions appear increasingly tyrannical and completely out of place in an increasingly postmodern context. And so we shouldn't be surprised in the least to see this massive global rebellion against these technocratic measures. Now, again, if we're thinking big picture here, we should note that these two dynamics, like technology and tradition, the modern and the postmodern, they're beginning to more and more come together in a new synthesis that some scholars are referring to as archaeofuturism. The notion that as modernist sentiments wane, technological advancement continues. But it continues in a world where the majority of populations have gone back to traditionalist conceptions of life. We might think of archaeofuturism as a theatrical version, right, of Star Wars, where, of course, you have amazing technology coexisting with ancient religious orders like the Jedi. So that kind of rapprochement between technology and tradition is what will most likely work itself out in the not-so-distant future. But until that time, the clash between technocrats and traditionalists will indeed continue and will only increase for the foreseeable future. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded on the amazing secret behind the Taliban's win. This is a major global paradigm shift going on right before our very eyes, and you're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.